Bellroy keeps producing different versions of the Slim Sleeve design, like rabbits going on spring break. So what are the differences? Well, stick around to find out. Well, we have the original Slim Sleeve, the designer, and this new premium one here. Now, not including the Apex, as its construction is vastly different than these three. Now, if you haven't seen it yet, I did a comparison between the original and this designer edition, which you can see up here at the top. So let's do a close-up comparison of the footprint, the construction of the wallets, then we'll move into the feature differences, card and cash storage, quality differences, which is where we'll see all that's important with these wallets. So let's get started. Now, I've shown you a comparison between the original and the designer. I'll step that aside for just a second so we can look at the difference, which honestly, the premium is the same as the designer, and I made a comparison between the designer and the original. Anyway, let's look at it. So we open it up here, we can see that we do have the same layout, like I mentioned. The two cards, left and right, here we see on top, and left and right on the bottom. What's different though is you can see the cut. There is a step down cut up here, which I think is really nice for a thumb and finger to grab a card. But down here on the premium, we see that it's at a slant. It's the same that we saw here on the designer. And it still provides, again, access to a card to be able to grasp it with your finger. I'll show that by putting a card in here just real quickly. We see that option. You can grab it with your thumb and finger, get a card in and out, and it's very much the same like we have with the original. Place this in here, we have an option, actually more space here, to grab a card and pull it out. Now, despite the small change in the layout design between the original and then what we see in the designer and the premium, they hold the same number of cards. Company says it can hold between 4 to 12 plus some cash. And we've put 6 cards in each of these before, and it's really a perfect number in my mind before it starts stretching. And 3 slips of cash folded over once if the currency facilitates it is really the way to go. Folding cash once, if you can't put it in completely in a wrap or in a bifold, is really the best way to do that. Now, yen and larger, pound and euro notes will need to be folded in thirds or fourths, but all other currencies folded work once in this wallet. Let me show you. We're going to grab 3 slips of US dollars, show how this works in here with the original. Again, fits in nicely and does not interfere with the spine. We take this out, we try it in the designer. Not surprised for some reason, anyway. We go into the premium. Now let's look at some other currencies. As mentioned with the euro, we'll take out these larger notes because they need to be folded in thirds or quarters. But if we go to these smaller euros and we put these in here, we notice that we don't have that same problem. But what about some other currencies? So now let's try some pound sterling. Well, with pound sterling, we have this massive 50-pound note. Thank goodness that is going away in 2021, and we'll end up with a replacement of like a poly note, which these are, and they're not as tall. They're more reasonable. And so to take the existing poly notes, and we see how they fits just fine in here. Seems like it may stick out a little bit, but comparison to dollars, they are slightly larger, but still fit fine without interference in regards to the spine. You may say, well, geez, it sticks out a lot, but it doesn't interfere with the spine, and that's really the critical component here. Now, like the pound, Australian currency is also poly notes, but you can tell that they're not very tall. They're shorter, which is what we need to facilitate putting these in the wallets properly. Now, granted, Bellroy is an Australian company, so you would expect that this would fit beautifully in their wallets, and as we're seeing, it does. Now, from a quality perspective, the difference in construction is the largest item for us to review since the basic features and capacity are the same. The material differences between these versions are also present. Leather is one of the main differences between these 3 wallets, with the original being constructed from a top-grain veg tan leather. I love the fact we can still see the flesh side of the leather in here. It just means there's not other things introduced. With the designer, this is a full-grain nubuck leather. It's veg tanned also, which gives it a suede type feel, and it's very, very soft. Now, the cut of the leather here has a heavier weight, or it's thicker than what we see here on the original, and it has this embossing print here that looks really, really nice with this. And this is a very popular color. Now on the premium, it uses a full grain veg tan leather, but it's using a different tanning method. It's the dry tan method, which we've mentioned before from the Echo Group, with their leather being sourced from various parts all over the world. Now one difference where Bellroy, the differences here is where Bellroy anchors the pull straps. On the original, we can see on the back that this is where the pull strap has been anchored. It's anchored to the immediate outside piece of leather that's in here. And that's not a bad thing in what we're looking at here. And another thing is, because we know it's secured to leather, which is great, but we can also see that in the pass-through loop, that it's reinforced on both sides. That's great, so it does not tear. And that's not something that all vendors or manufacturers who produce similar wallets do. Now, if we move into the designer, the designer is very much like what we see with the premium. It is not anchored on the exterior. This is kept nice and clean and is a great aesthetic. It is anchored on the interior back, and so it's not on what is being presented on the outside of the wallet. And like the original, it does also have the reinforced loop pass-through here, which we like to see. With the design or the premium here, it reflects the same kind of learnings they had from the designer, and we can see that it is also attached here to the leather and has the same reinforcement in the pass-throughs here. Quite nice. And with that, we can see that the learnings from what they had from the original has spilled over into the designer, and then really in what I think is their final presentation here with the premium. Another significant difference in the construction is the edge treatment, which is painted for the designer and the premium edition. If we see here very closely, we can see that the edges are painted. Okay, and we can see that it is sewn through on both sides, and on both the designer and the premium here. And what makes that important is that this edge could wear off, but it takes a while. That's why that is there as protection. But if so, we don't have a wrap, which means that we don't have leather that wraps around, and if the edge wears off, then it just becomes frayed and starts to look really badly. Unlike the original, which does have that problem. They do not have an edge treatment here. And as we can see, the leather wraps around and we have this small lip here. That means that if this wears off here, this will, of course, still hold the wallet together because it still attaches here, but you'll have this begin to fray and it'll just start to look bad. So from a longevity perspective, we have a better edge treatment from the designer and the premium over the original. Now let's look at a few statistics or details of each of these. Now from a leather weight perspective, which is done in ounces, we can see that the original is at 2 ounces, but the designer and premium are at 2.5 ounces. That's pretty interesting. Now if we look at the weight itself, the original is 27 grams, the designer 37, and the premium 38. So more leather between the designer and premium than we see in the original, which is okay. From a price perspective, the Slim Sleeve original is $79. The designer, which is a short run, and it does, I don't know if it's going to come back or not, but it was selling for $139, but the premium is still selling for $115. Still significant in that. From a size perspective, the original is 3.74 by 3.15 by 0.2, and we see that the designer is very close, but it has more thickness to it. Again, it's a heavier weight of leather, so it's 0.4 inches on both the designer and premium. From a usability perspective, all three wallets are essentially designed the same. For my personal carry experience, it's an excellent wallet in all aspects. I've enjoyed it. I did a carry test on it. I'll put it up here so you can take a look at that. Now, from a capacity perspective, access from your pocket and the contents, it does sit in your pocket, very low impact profile. It's really quite nice. And this is one of Mark's favorite wallets if you saw the review or the top that we did here recently. So now let's take a look at the final reviews for each of these. Now if we look at the scores here, we can see that they're incredibly close. The premium and the designer suffer in their price, but they get a higher score in quality. And overall, they're all so close that it comes down to a lot of preference of whether you want something that's less expensive with the original, or you want something that may last you a little bit longer with the premium. And in that case, I wish that the learnings that came from this original and with their introduction of the designer that evolved into the premium resulted in the premium becoming the brand new Slim Sleeve with the same price as the original. I think that would be a home run and really solidify how awesome this wallet is in the minds of all those who've used it and who'd want to use it in the future. So there you go. It's a quick comparison between the three of them. Hopefully that gave you some perspective. We appreciate you being here. We'll see you in the next review. Bye.